Coming to a new country means that you also have to file taxes in that new country, in the Netherlands. And the tax rules are different in every country.
Yes.
That is really what the internationals experience, the Dutch tax system. What is their first reaction?
Well, their first reaction is usually a bit overwhelmed. Most of the expats here in the Netherlands, when they first come into contact with our tax system, they have no idea, which is of course logical, because most people in the Netherlands who've lived here their entire life, they have accumulated some base of knowledge throughout the years of how this works. Most people have heard of Box 1 and when to file your taxes, they know that. But even this basic knowledge is still just not familiar with most expats. And that makes it really hard for them to navigate the system, manage their obligations. And that's where we come in.
Yeah.
We try to help them navigate the system, help them understand a bit better what their obligations are, how this works, and how to optimize that tax return even.
Are the internationals overwhelmed by the complexity of the system, or by the fact that they have to pay quite a lot of taxes in a country like the Netherlands?
Yeah, well, it's actually a bit of both. It also depends a bit where they are from. Some other countries, like for example the US is a good example of this, already have very complex and fast systems. So an expat from there, is familiar with that. It can be very complex, but might be a bit shocked by the amount of taxes they would have to pay here. So it differs per expat. But those two reactions, I would say, are the main reactions that people have.
But I hope that they are aware of the amount of taxes and the 30% rulings, the special rules for the internationals before they sign a contract.
Yeah. Basically, what they get informed about is by their employer, and to what extent they get informed, it differs per employer, of course. Yeah. But that's usually already a benefit they get confronted with before actually coming to the Netherlands, of course. That's actually one of the main requirements for that ruling. So those people are experiencing a big tax break in that sense, and their first contact is with a big benefit, but that is also a very complex ruling, especially in certain scenarios. So the complexity is not lost on them and something they immediately have to deal with.
Yeah, now we are diving immediately into that 30% ruling. Steve, it's not always the case that they are eligible for this 30%. So you have to take care when you sign up for a contract that everything is done well.
Yeah, that's one of the main requirements. Actually, is also that the employer and the employee both agree together to apply for this ruling. We normally see this like in a small article in their employment contract or in an addendum.
And that needs to be there.
It needs to be there. Yeah, specifically, it needs to be agreed by both parties that they will apply for it together. Otherwise, you cannot get the ruling.
And if you forgot to check that, is there a way back?
You can always on a later date still draft an addendum to that employment contract in which you basically state the same things. But that needs to be stated at some point and needs to be on paper, basically, that the employee and the employer have agreed to that. So you can fix it later, but it does need to be formally there.
Would you recommend to get advice before you sign a contract if you're still not in the Netherlands and you plan to come to the Netherlands and then just sign because you believe that is the usual ruling in the Netherlands?
I would recommend still getting some advice. It can never hurt to talk to someone who knows a little bit more about the subject, especially when it's regarding, of course, a whole new country, a whole new system that you will have to deal with. So it never hurts to schedule a meeting with someone like Expat Service, where you can at least go into a little bit more detail of what the consequences would be of that move and applying for the ruling, for example. Usually there is not really like a downside to applying for the ruling. I mean, if you don't meet the requirements, you just don't get it. That's not like a fine or anything. I would recommend at least talking to someone to get a little bit more information regarding what you will be dealing with and the consequences of it. It's not always necessary to do so.
Yeah. And now you are in the Netherlands, you have to file taxes. You can go just to the website of the Belastingdienst. They already have quite a bit of information.
Yeah, that's
so just ticking the boxes and you're done.
Well, that might be true for most Dutch people who only have, for example, their annual statement from their employer that's already pre-filled in on a tax authority's website. But what we often see with expats is that their situation is a little bit more complex. For example, they often have still some equity, some assets back home in their home country, or they have some income that they still get from there. Basically, aspects of that tax return that aren't pre-filled in, that aren't as straightforward as just clicking through it and seeing if some numbers match up. Not only are they confronted with a system that they're not familiar with, their situation is always a lot more complex, usually at least, than most Dutch people. So for their situation, it's usually useful to at least talk to someone to get a little bit more information about this process.
Yeah. Now I can also imagine that, given your situation, you can fill in the way in a standard way, but sometimes there is some flexibility in how you treat things for a tax system, or is it more a matter of knowing the rules and knowing how to?
Well, it's a lot of knowing the rules, because despite what some people think, there is, of course, wiggle room within someone's tax return. However, in the more basic situations, people with an annual statement, maybe their own home here, there are definitely things you can do, but there is still a right way of doing it. There is ways to optimize it, but not necessarily like secret deductions that you can make use of that no one knows about.
I thought that's what the advisor's for. I thought that was the reason why we need an advisor to see exactly where the
holes are. Yeah, well, the thing is, there is a way to do it the right way, and that's the most optimized way as well. But there is a little bit of gray area that you can make use of. Like, for example, if you have a partner, there are certain things you can divide between you and your partner to get a more beneficial outcome. In whichever way you divide those is completely up to you at that point. And having the knowledge to make that the most optimized outcome, that's definitely what you can use an advisor for. But I wouldn't say there are secrets to the tax code that no one knows about, or something like that. Yeah. Although that might be the perception that some people do have.
Steve van der Bokum of the Expert Service. This is exactly the topic that we will be debating in this podcast and in the next editions on it, but also on Radio for Brainport.
Design, lifestyle, technology and innovation. More on podcasts for Brainport.